She started her day earlier than most people, slipping into the quiet, dimly lit restaurant before the morning crowd arrived. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air, comforting in a way that made the long hours seem lighter. She tied her apron neatly around her waist and checked the tables, arranging napkins and cutlery with care. Even though her work was often exhausting, she found satisfaction in small, quiet things. A clean table, a polite smile from a customer, a tip left without anyone noticing. She had been working at the restaurant for years, but her life outside of it was different from what anyone could guess. Most people saw her as just a waitress, someone who served meals and cleared tables, but inside her chest beat a heart full of music. She had learned to play the piano as a child, her fingers dancing across the keys with ease. Music had been her first love, her escape from the pressures of the world, but life had forced her to leave it behind. School, bills, and responsibilities had pushed the piano into the corner of her small apartment, covered in dust but never forgotten. Even now, after years of being away from the stage, she could still feel the music inside her. When the restaurant was quiet, she sometimes hummed softly under her breath, imagining herself in a concert hall with lights dimmed and an expectant audience. The piano wasn't gone from her life. It lived in her memories, in the way she moved her hands, in the rhythm of her steps as she carried trays across the polished floors. That morning, the restaurant was unusually busy. Orders flew in, and she moved from table to table with practiced efficiency. She noticed a familiar face among the diners, a man she had seen before. He was wealthy, well-dressed, and had an air of arrogance that made the staff wary. He often came with friends, holding conversations loudly and tipping grudgingly. Today he gave her a cold smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. There was something in his gaze that made her uneasy, but she forced a polite nod and continued her work. She moved through the crowd, taking orders, serving drinks, clearing plates, all the while keeping her thoughts elsewhere. Music was always there in the background, a soft rhythm in her mind that helped her stay calm amidst the chaos. She remembered the times she had played in her tiny living room, the way the notes would flow like water from her fingers. She remembered the pride in her parents' eyes when they saw her perform at school recitals. Life had changed, but those memories stayed with her, warm and unbroken. By midday, the restaurant had quieted down. She finally found a moment to breathe and leaned against the counter, wiping sweat from her forehead. She watched the wealthy man from across the room, noticing the way he spoke to the staff with subtle impatience. He didn't seem to care about anyone but himself, and yet there was something strangely compelling about his presence. She shook her head, reminding herself to stay focused on her work and not get distracted by someone who thought so highly of themselves. As she cleaned a nearby table, one of her coworkers whispered to her, a mischievous grin on his face. "He's been asking about you," he said softly, careful not to be overheard. "He heard you used to play the piano. Said he'd like to see it." She felt a sudden tension in her chest. She had hoped her past would stay in the past, hidden away like a fragile treasure. But now someone had noticed. She forced a polite smile and nodded, hoping he wouldn't act on the comment. Her music was hers alone, a part of her identity that she wasn't ready to share with the world. Hours passed, and the restaurant began to fill again for the evening crowd. She moved with the same grace, but her mind was unsettled. Thoughts of the piano and the wealthy man's curiosity kept tugging at her focus. She had learned long ago to separate her passions from her work, to keep her dreams safe from prying eyes. But the idea that someone might force her into the spotlight made her stomach tighten. She couldn't let anyone see that side of her unless she chose to. When the dinner rush finally ended, she stayed behind to clean, humming softly as she worked. The restaurant was quiet, the soft glow of the lights reflecting on the polished floors. She felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety, knowing that tomorrow could bring the same challenges, or perhaps something entirely unexpected. She picked up a small notebook she kept tucked in her apron pocket and jotted down a few musical ideas, the notes flowing as naturally as breathing. This was her world, her secret place, where she could still be herself without judgment. As she packed her bag to leave, the wealthy man approached her table. His smile was thin, almost forced, and his eyes held a spark of amusement. "I hear you play the piano," he said casually, as if it were the most ordinary topic in the world. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "I used to," she replied simply, hoping to end the conversation. He leaned slightly closer, his tone almost teasing. "Would you play for us sometime? At a party, perhaps?" She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The idea of performing in front of a crowd, especially one full of people like him, was terrifying. She shook her head, trying to find words that would politely decline without offending him. But before she could respond, he laughed lightly and walked away, leaving her with a mix of fear and curiosity. Walking home that night, she felt the city buzzing around her. Lights flickering, cars rushing by, people immersed in their own lives. She kept thinking about the piano, about the music waiting in her fingertips, and about the man who had suddenly pulled her past into the present. It was a dangerous thought, one that could lead to exposure, but it also stirred something deep inside her. Maybe it was a chance to reclaim a part of herself she had lost. Maybe it was a challenge she wasn't ready to face. In her small apartment, she sat at the old piano that had been gathering dust for months. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the familiar resistance beneath her fingers. The music was hesitant at first, like a timid bird testing the wind, but soon it grew stronger. Notes flowed, filling the room with sound that made her forget the worries of the world outside. She closed her eyes, letting the melody take over, imagining herself on a stage, playing for an audience that could understand her soul. She played until the night grew quiet and the city outside her window went to sleep. The music left her exhausted but exhilarated, a reminder of the talent she had almost buried. She knew that life would continue to challenge her, that the wealthy man and his intentions might come back to complicate things. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of courage, a sense that her music was still alive and waiting for the right moment. She turned off the piano and sat in silence, letting the echoes of the final notes fade. Her heart was racing, a mix of fear, anticipation, and hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she couldn't ignore the call of her passion. Music was part of her, and no one could take that away. Not even the millionaire, not even the world outside her small apartment, could dim the light of her talent. She fell asleep that night with a quiet smile, ready to face whatever challenges might come, knowing that she carried something beautiful within her that no one could ever truly see or touch without her permission. The next day, she arrived at the restaurant early, just as the sun painted the streets with soft gold. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh bread, comforting and familiar. She moved quickly to prepare the tables, arranging the cutlery with care and folding the napkins precisely. Even though her mind was busy with the thought of yesterday's encounter, she forced herself to focus on the routine of her work. Life was always about keeping calm in chaos, and this morning was no different. As the lunch crowd arrived, the usual hum of conversation filled the air. She carried trays with a practiced grace, smiling politely at customers and taking orders without hesitation. But she couldn't shake off the thought of the wealthy man who had approached her yesterday. There was something in the way he had asked about her music that made her uneasy, as if he wanted to test her or provoke a reaction she wasn't ready to give. She tried to push the thought aside, reminding herself that she worked here to earn a living, not to perform for strangers. Her co-workers noticed her distraction. One of them, a cheerful girl with a quick laugh, leaned over during a brief moment of calm and whispered, "He asked the manager if you'd come to a private party tonight." She froze for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind. Party? Private? She hadn't expected anything like this, and the idea of performing in front of wealthy strangers made her feel small and exposed. "Why would he want me there?" she asked softly, trying to sound casual, though her voice shook slightly. The girl shrugged. "I don't know. He just said he wants all his guests entertained, and someone mentioned you play piano. I think he wants to see it for himself." Her stomach twisted. She had always kept her talent private, a secret she held close to her heart. She had played for herself in her tiny apartment, when no one was around to watch. The thought of a room full of strangers judging her, or worse, laughing at her, was terrifying. She felt the walls of her world closing in, and yet a small part of her wondered if this could be a chance to show the world what she could really do. She spent the rest of the day serving customers, her movements automatic, her mind elsewhere. Orders, drinks, and plates blurred together as she tried to concentrate on the rhythm of her work. Yet she could not ignore the nervous flutter that kept returning whenever she thought about the party. She cleaned tables, wiped counters, and stacked chairs, all the while rehearsing in her mind what she might say if asked to perform. She told herself she could refuse, that she didn't have to be part of this, but the words felt weak and unconvincing. By evening, the restaurant had quieted down, and the manager approached her with a polite smile. "There's a private event tonight," he said gently. "The Millionaire requested you. He thinks you might help with some entertainment." She forced a smile, but her hands felt clammy. I don't know if I can," she admitted quietly. "I'm not ready to perform in front of people." The manager's eyes softened. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," but he insisted. "I just wanted to warn you." She nodded, swallowing hard. The decision wasn't hers to make entirely. The job came with obligations, and refusing outright could put her in trouble. She spent the ride home thinking of her piano, imagining herself sitting at the keys, letting the music flow, and yet imagining the scornful looks of an audience that expected her to fail. Fear and desire mingled in her chest, an impossible tangle she couldn't untangle. At her apartment, she paced the small living room, her thoughts racing. The old piano sat in the corner, untouched for months, but now it seemed to beckon her. She walked over and ran her fingers lightly across the keys, the familiar resistance bringing back memories of hours spent practicing, of melodies that had once filled her soul. The notes were rusty at first, hesitant and uncertain, but as she continued, the music began to flow again, stronger and surer. Her neighbor, an elderly woman who lived across the hall, knocked gently on the door. "I heard music," she said, smiling warmly. "It's beautiful. You haven't lost your touch." She laughed softly, feeling a small spark of pride. "Thank you," she said, though her heart still raced. I haven't played in a while." The woman nodded. "Sometimes we need to remember our strengths. Don't hide your gifts. Life will always throw challenges, but your talent is yours. Use it if you can." Her words stayed with her as night fell. She practiced quietly, letting the music fill the small apartment, imagining the piano at the party, imagining the eyes that might be on her, judging, expecting, waiting. The fear was still there, but a tiny flame of courage had ignited, a whisper that maybe she could face this challenge. Maybe she could take the music that had been hidden for so long and share it with the world, even if only for a brief moment. The day of the party arrived, and she dressed carefully, choosing something simple but elegant. Her heart raced as she looked at her reflection, seeing a girl who had spent years serving others, who had kept her talent locked away, and now stood at the edge of a moment that could change everything. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay calm, to remember that she had the music inside her and it would guide her. The restaurant arranged transportation for her to the Millionaire's private residence. She stepped into the sleek, black car, her fingers gripping the seat tightly as they drove through the city streets. The city lights flickered past, and she imagined the life of the people she passed, unaware of the private drama that awaited her. Her mind raced with scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last, but always returning to the piano and the music she could summon with her own hands. When they arrived, the mansion loomed large, glittering with lights and filled with the sound of laughter and chatter. Guests in expensive dresses and suits moved about, sipping drinks and talking loudly, unaware of the nervous girl about to enter their midst. She felt small in the grand space, a tiny figure in a world of wealth and privilege. The wealthy man noticed her immediately, his smirk sharp and calculating. He gestured toward her with an air of superiority, as if she were a piece of furniture rather than a person with a lifetime of talent hidden within her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, moving past the crowd with measured steps. Guests glanced at her curiously, some with polite interest, others with barely concealed amusement. She felt their eyes on her, judging, expecting, waiting for a mistake. Her stomach churned, but she focused on the piano in the corner of the room. Its polished surface gleamed under the lights, and she felt the familiar pull, the call of the music she loved. She approached the instrument, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. The room fell into a hush, or at least it seemed so to her. The wealthy man's eyes gleamed with anticipation, and she sensed that he believed she would falter, that she would be exposed for the supposed fraud he thought she was. But she took a deep breath, centering herself. She could not let fear control her. Not now, not after years of holding her music close to her heart. She pressed the first key, and the note rang clear and true. Her fingers moved with surprising confidence, each note following the other with grace and precision. At first, the melody was soft, tentative, testing the waters of the audience's attention. But as she continued, the music grew stronger, richer, more expressive. It filled the room, curling around the guests, demanding their attention, forcing them to listen. The wealthy man's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. This was not the failure he had expected. This was something beautiful, something powerful, something undeniable. Guests began to stop their conversations, turning toward the piano in surprise. Whispers spread through the crowd, growing into murmurs of admiration. Her fingers danced across the keys, each note carrying emotion, skill, and the truth of her long-hidden talent. The room, once filled with noise and pretense, now held a collective breath, waiting, watching, amazed. She felt the music flow through her, and with it came a surge of courage. She was no longer a waitress performing at someone else's whim. She was a musician, reclaiming the power that had always been hers. The fear that had gripped her for weeks began to melt away, replaced by a quiet joy, a sense of liberation she had not felt in years. This was her moment, her music, her voice, and no one could take that away. As the final notes echoed through the grand room, the guests erupted into applause, some standing, some wiping away tears. The wealthy man sat frozen, his plan undone, his confidence shattered. She bowed slightly, smiling softly, and realized that she had not only survived the ordeal but had transformed it into triumph. The music had spoken louder than fear, louder than judgment, louder than arrogance. And in that moment, she knew that her life, her dreams, and her talent were hers to command, and the world had finally seen a glimpse of the extraordinary within her. The party was in full swing when she arrived, the large mansion alive with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting sparkling lights across the room, and expensive decorations filled every corner. Guests in elegant dresses and tailored suits moved about, engaged in lively conversation, their voices carrying an air of importance and entitlement. She felt her chest tighten as she stepped into this world, a place so different from the quiet restaurant where she worked. She was guided through the crowd by one of the host's assistants, who smiled politely but did not speak much. She kept her gaze down, her steps careful and measured. Every glance from the guests felt like a small judgment, their eyes flicking over her, noting her simple dress, her plain shoes, and the modest way she carried herself. She tried to remind herself that she had done nothing wrong, that her place was here only because she worked at the restaurant, and yet the uneasy flutter in her stomach would not go away. In the center of the room stood a grand piano, polished and gleaming under the lights. Her heart began to pound as she approached it, feeling the weight of the crowd around her. The wealthy man who had orchestrated this event waited nearby, his expression smug, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He believed he had her cornered, that she would falter and become the subject of amusement for the evening. The thought of being humiliated in front of these people made her hands tremble slightly, but she took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm. The host, a friend of the millionaire, approached and introduced her to the guests. "Everyone," he said, his voice polite but commanding, "this young woman is a waitress at our favorite restaurant. We have discovered she has an interesting talent, and she has graciously agreed to share it with us tonight." The words cut through her like ice. The phrase "agreed to share" implied choice, but she had not truly agreed. Her pulse quickened as the guests murmured, some curious, some skeptical, some clearly amused. She felt exposed, like a small figure standing in a room that could swallow her whole. The wealthy man stepped forward, a smile playing on his lips. "Yes, let's hear what she can do," he said almost teasingly. "I have heard stories, but I am curious to see if they are true." The room hushed, and she realized every eye was on her. The fear that had been quietly gnawing at her grew into a wave that threatened to pull her under. She had faced difficult situations before, but nothing like this, nothing with so many people watching, judging, expecting. She approached the piano, her fingers brushing lightly against the cool, smooth keys. The polished surface reflected the lights and the faces around her. 1,000 reflections of curiosity, expectation, and subtle judgment. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. Music had always been her refuge, her friend in lonely hours, and now it was her only shield against the fear pressing in from every direction. She pressed the first key, and the sound rang clear and true, surprising even herself with its confidence. The initial notes were soft, almost tentative, as if testing the waters. The crowd leaned slightly forward, their expressions a mixture of surprise and curiosity. The wealthy man's smirk faltered for the first time. He had expected a weak performance, perhaps a clumsy stumble, something to confirm his superiority. Instead, he heard a note, pure and deliberate, that demanded attention. As her fingers moved over the keys, the music began to unfold, gentle at first, then building with strength and clarity. Each note carried emotion, telling a story that words could not convey. The guests were drawn into the sound, their conversations fading into silence. They watched, some with wide eyes, others with mouths slightly open, unable to look away. The wealthy man shifted uncomfortably, realizing his plan to embarrass her had not only failed but had backfired spectacularly. She played with growing confidence, each note more assured than the last. Her fingers flew across the keys, dancing with precision and grace. The room seemed to transform, the air itself vibrating with the beauty of the music. The guests, who had come expecting entertainment, found themselves captivated, carried away by the melody that seemed to speak directly to their hearts. They had seen musicians before, but there was something in her playing, something raw, honest, and real, that left them stunned. Whispers spread through the crowd, soft murmurs of astonishment. Some guests began to record the performance on their phones, not wanting to forget this moment. Others simply stood in silence, letting the music wash over them. The atmosphere shifted from casual party chatter to reverent attention, a shared recognition of talent that no one could ignore. Even the wealthy man, who had orchestrated this event with pride, looked pale and unsettled, his confidence shattered by the undeniable skill before him. She felt a surge of liberation as the music flowed through her. No longer a waitress performing under duress, she became the musician she had always been in secret. Every note, every chord carried a piece of her story, her struggles, her dreams, her years of hidden practice. The fear that had gripped her melted away, replaced by exhilaration, a deep, unshakable joy. The music became her voice, and in that moment, it spoke louder than any words, louder than any judgment, louder than the expectations of the crowd. The guests were completely absorbed, their initial curiosity transformed into admiration. Some clapped softly between pieces, almost afraid to interrupt the spell, while others simply watched, their faces reflecting awe and respect. The room was no longer a place of social pretense and subtle competition. It had become a space of shared emotion, a temporary sanctuary created by the power of her music. The wealthy man tried to hide his discomfort, shifting his weight and glancing around nervously, realizing that the attention he had hoped to command now belonged entirely to her. Her fingers continued to move effortlessly, the music flowing as if it had been waiting all these years for this very moment. She allowed herself to close her eyes, letting the melody guide her, letting the rhythm of her heart and hands align. She imagined herself in a concert hall, with an audience that truly listened, and for the first time in years, she felt that same thrill, that same connection to her art, as if nothing had ever been lost. The grandeur of the room, the opulence surrounding her, faded into the background, leaving only the music and the truth of her talent. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and resonant, as if reluctant to leave the space that had become their own. There was a brief, almost shocked silence before the applause erupted. Hands clapped vigorously, some guests standing to show their admiration, others cheering softly, moved by what they had witnessed. She bowed slightly, a small smile on her face, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. She had survived the ordeal, and in doing so, she had claimed something more precious, her dignity and the recognition of her talent. The wealthy man looked on, speechless. His plan to humiliate her had failed, replaced by an overwhelming realization that he had underestimated her. He had sought to expose weakness and found brilliance instead. She had turned his intentions on their head, and now the room celebrated her skill, not his status or influence. Guests began to approach her, offering compliments, congratulations, and even inquiries about future performances. The admiration was genuine, their interest sparked not by her job or her social position, but by the music she had created, by the talent that could not be hidden any longer. The fear that had threatened to paralyze her had transformed into empowerment, a reminder that her worth was not defined by the opinions or schemes of others, but by her own abilities and courage. As she stepped away from the piano, her hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline, she felt a profound shift within herself. The experience had been terrifying, yes, but it had also opened a door, a possibility she had not dared to imagine. The world could be intimidating and cruel, filled with people who tried to diminish others for their own amusement, but it could also be full of wonder, beauty, and unexpected opportunity. She realized that she would never again allow fear or doubt to keep her from her music, from the part of herself that had always been true and alive. The party continued around her, but she walked through it with a new confidence. Conversations seemed distant now, and the room, once overwhelming, felt smaller, more manageable. She had faced an intense challenge, and she had prevailed. The music had carried her through, and in doing so, it had revealed something she had always known but sometimes forgot. Her talent, her voice, her heart were powerful, and they could not be ignored. By the end of the evening, she returned to the quiet of the grand hall, the piano behind her, the applause still echoing faintly in her ears. The wealthy man lingered nearby, no longer smirking, no longer commanding attention. He had been unmasked, in a way, by the very performance he had sought to provoke. She felt a quiet satisfaction in that, a small, private triumph that made the evening unforgettable. As she stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling around her, she felt lighter than she had in years. Fear, anticipation, and pressure had given way to exhilaration and pride. She had faced a public trial, and her music had spoken the truth. She had been judged, and she had risen above it. In the distance, the streets stretched on, full of possibilities, and she realized that this night was only the beginning, a turning point that would guide her toward a future where her talent could shine freely, without fear or apology. She sat at the grand piano, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers, and for a moment, the noise of the party faded away. The crowd's murmurs, the clinking of glasses, and the subtle laughter of the wealthy guests all melted into the background. There was only her, the piano, and the music that had always lived inside her. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let her fingers move as if remembering something they had never truly forgotten. The first notes were soft, hesitant, delicate, and almost shy. She could feel the tension in the room, the curiosity of the guests, and the scrutiny of the wealthy man who had hoped for her embarrassment. But with each passing measure, her confidence returned. The notes grew stronger, clearer, and the music began to flow with a life of its own. She played with emotion, pouring her experiences, her struggles, and her dreams into the melody. It was no longer a performance imposed on her. It was a conversation between her and the world, a language only music could convey. The guests slowly began to notice, their conversations fading as they listened. Some leaned forward, eyes wide in disbelief. The melody was unexpected, powerful, and beautiful. It carried a story of resilience and hope, of hidden talent finally being recognized. Whispers moved through the crowd, spreading quickly, as people realized that this young woman, who had seemed so ordinary, possessed a remarkable gift. Phones appeared in hands to record the moment, but even that felt secondary to the raw beauty of what was unfolding. She played faster now, her fingers flying across the keys with precision and grace. The music shifted from gentle passages to bold, expressive chords that filled the room with energy. The wealthy man's smirk had disappeared, replaced by a tight, almost panicked look. He had imagined her failing, imagined the laughter of his guests at her expense. But instead, he watched as she captivated everyone around him. The audience was silent, transfixed, and completely absorbed in her music. With every note, she felt herself becoming stronger. The years she had spent hiding her talent, practicing in solitude, fearing judgment, seemed to pour into her performance. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, a creator, a force that could not be ignored. She could feel the emotions of the listeners, their astonishment, their admiration, and it fueled her even more. The music rose, filling every corner of the room, bending the air with its intensity, carrying everyone along with it. A few guests whispered to one another, unable to hide their amazement. "She's incredible," one said softly. "I've never heard anyone play like that." Another nodded, eyes wide. "It's like she's telling a story with every note." She could feel the shift in the room, from polite curiosity to genuine awe, and it gave her courage. She allowed herself to close her eyes completely now, letting her hands guide her through the music. Every chord was a statement of her identity, her years of hidden dedication, and her unwavering love for what she did. The wealthy man shifted uneasily, now aware that he had misjudged her entirely. He had expected failure, or at least mediocrity, but what he witnessed was brilliance. His carefully constructed plan to humiliate her had backfired, and he realized too late that he had been arrogant, dismissing someone whose talent far exceeded his expectations. She felt no anger toward him. Instead, she felt a quiet triumph, a sense that she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been waiting for recognition. The music flowed seamlessly from one piece to the next, changing tempo, mood, and intensity. The guests followed every note, their expressions shifting with the emotion of the melodies. Some were moved to tears, others to laughter, caught up in the beauty of what they were hearing. It was not merely technical skill that captivated them. It was the honesty and soul of the performance, the way she had poured herself into every phrase, making the music come alive. The crescendo approached, and her fingers moved with increasing speed, yet with perfect control. She felt exhilarated, her heart racing in time with the final notes. The energy in the room was electric, the audience holding its collective breath. And then, with a final, powerful chord, she ended the performance. The sound lingered, a resonant echo that seemed to fill the entire mansion, leaving a silence that was almost sacred. For a moment, no one moved. The audience seemed frozen, absorbing the weight and beauty of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause, cheers, and praise. Guests were on their feet, clapping vigorously, some wiping away tears, others simply staring in astonishment. She bowed slightly, a humble smile on her face, feeling a wave of relief and pride. She had faced the fear, the humiliation that had been set for her, and had turned it into something unforgettable. The wealthy man stood frozen, his plan entirely ruined. He had expected to dominate the moment, to highlight his own importance by exposing her, but the attention had shifted completely. Every eye in the room was on her, and he realized that he had underestimated the depth of her talent, the strength of her spirit. He tried to regain his composure, but the damage had been done. His influence could not overshadow the performance she had just given. The truth of her skill was undeniable. Guests approached her one by one, offering compliments, congratulations, and even opportunities. Some were music enthusiasts, others event organizers, and some were simply moved by the sincerity and talent she had displayed. Each word of praise strengthened her confidence, each acknowledgement of her ability a reminder that her years of dedication had not been wasted. She realized that the music she had kept hidden was finally recognized, not because of connections or social standing, but because of its inherent power and truth. She stepped away from the piano, her fingers still tingling from the intensity of the performance, and looked around the room. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. Where there had been curiosity and expectation, there was now admiration and respect. People no longer saw her as just a waitress. They saw an artist, a creator, someone who had transformed fear into brilliance. She felt a profound sense of validation, a recognition that her efforts, her talent, and her perseverance had finally been seen. The wealthy man lingered nearby, unable to mask his discomfort. He had tried to control the situation, to assert his power over her, but she had emerged victorious without even needing to speak a word. Her music had done all the work, conveying strength, emotion, and authenticity in a way that no argument or social status could compete with. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had maintained her dignity while turning the situation into a personal triumph. As the applause continued, she allowed herself a small, private smile. She had faced an intense challenge, one that could have crushed her confidence, and had instead risen above it. The experience had reminded her that fear was not the enemy. It was simply a challenge to overcome, and she had done so through the one thing that had always been hers, her music. She realized that she had reclaimed more than just the attention of the audience. She had reclaimed a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. The party gradually returned to its normal rhythm, conversations resuming, laughter filling the room once more. But she walked through it with a new sense of calm and confidence. She had faced the scrutiny of others, the pressure to perform, and the potential for humiliation, and had transformed it into an opportunity to shine. The experience had changed her, not just in the eyes of the guests, but in her own perception of herself. She had proven, above all, that her talent and courage could stand against fear, judgment, and expectation. When she finally stepped away from the grand piano and into the quiet of the mansion's hallways, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The applause and admiration still echoed faintly in her ears, a reminder of what she had accomplished. She knew that the journey ahead would still have challenges, that not everyone would understand or appreciate her abilities. But for the first time in a long time, she felt unstoppable, ready to face whatever came next with confidence, knowing that her music could inspire, captivate, and transform. As she exited the mansion into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling around her, she felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had been forced into an impossible situation, yet she had turned it into a moment of triumph and recognition. The world had seen her talent, not as a novelty or a curiosity, but as a true expression of her heart and soul. And in that recognition, she found not only validation but also the courage to embrace her future, wherever it might lead, with the music that had always been a part of her guiding the way. After the performance, the room slowly returned to its usual buzz, but the energy was different now. The guests no longer chatted casually or mingled just for the sake of appearances. Conversations were filled with admiration and curiosity about the young woman who had transformed fear into music. People approached her one by one, eager to compliment her, ask about her training, or find out where she might perform again. Each interaction was a mixture of surprise and genuine respect, as they realized the depth of talent that had been hidden behind her quiet demeanor at the restaurant. She smiled politely at each person, her heart swelling with a combination of relief and pride. The nervousness that had haunted her for weeks was now replaced by a quiet confidence. She had faced a room full of strangers, judgment, and expectation, and had emerged victorious. The realization that she had done something extraordinary without losing herself was empowering. She walked with her head held high, feeling the weight of her previous fear lift off her shoulders. The wealthy man, who had tried to manipulate the situation for his amusement, lingered at the edge of the room. His expression was unreadable, a mix of discomfort and disbelief. He had underestimated her, assumed she would falter, and now found himself unable to regain the attention that had shifted entirely to her. He tried to engage some of the guests, but their eyes and attention kept returning to her. It was a subtle, yet unmistakable, demonstration of her triumph. She did not gloat, nor did she seek revenge. She simply allowed her talent and grace to speak for themselves. One of the guests, an event organizer, approached her cautiously. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Have you ever considered performing professionally? I think there's a real opportunity here for you to share your talent with more people." She felt a flutter of hope in her chest. The thought of performing again, not out of obligation or pressure, but as a choice, was both thrilling and terrifying. She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the piano for reassurance. I haven't had the chance," she admitted softly, "but I'd like to try." Another guest, a music teacher, joined the conversation. "Your control, your emotion, your technique, these are things most professionals spend years developing. It's rare to see such talent, especially someone so young. I would love to help you advance if you're interested." The words made her heart beat faster. She had spent years hiding her talent, fearing judgment and ridicule. And now she was being offered guidance and support from people who truly understood her craft. She felt a sense of validation she had never experienced before. As the night went on, more people approached her, each encounter reinforcing the sense that her life was shifting. Offers to perform at smaller events, invitations to music workshops, and even suggestions for formal training filled the evening. She listened carefully, absorbing each opportunity with gratitude and cautious optimism. For the first time, she began to believe that her music could be more than a private solace. It could be a path to something larger, something she had always dreamed of. Throughout the evening, she maintained her humility, never forgetting the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the countless hours spent practicing in solitude, the sacrifices she had made, and the moments of doubt that had almost silenced her music forever. Each note she had played tonight was a testament to her perseverance and dedication. The applause, the admiration, and the genuine interest of the guests were not just recognition of her skill, but acknowledgement of her resilience. After the performance, the room slowly returned to its usual buzz, but the energy was different now. The guests no longer chatted casually or mingled just for the sake of appearances. Conversations were filled with admiration and curiosity about the young woman who had transformed fear into music. People approached her one by one, eager to compliment her, ask about her training, or find out where she might perform again. Each interaction was a mixture of surprise and genuine respect, as they realized the depth of talent that had been hidden behind her quiet demeanor at the restaurant. She smiled politely at each person, her heart swelling with a combination of relief and pride. The nervousness that had haunted her for weeks was now replaced by a quiet confidence. She had faced a room full of strangers, judgment, and expectation, and had emerged victorious. The realization that she had done something extraordinary without losing herself was empowering. She walked with her head held high, feeling the weight of her previous fear lift off her shoulders. The wealthy man, who had tried to manipulate the situation for his amusement, lingered at the edge of the room. His expression was unreadable, a mix of discomfort and disbelief. He had underestimated her, assumed she would falter, and now found himself unable to regain the attention that had shifted entirely to her. He tried to engage some of the guests, but their eyes and attention kept returning to her. It was a subtle, yet unmistakable, demonstration of her triumph. She did not gloat, nor did she seek revenge. She simply allowed her talent and grace to speak for themselves. One of the guests, an event organizer, approached her cautiously. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Have you ever considered performing professionally? I think there's a real opportunity here for you to share your talent with more people." She felt a flutter of hope in her chest. The thought of performing again, not out of obligation or pressure, but as a choice, was both thrilling and terrifying. She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the piano for reassurance. I haven't had the chance, she admitted softly, but I'd like to try. Another guest, a music teacher, joined the conversation. Your control, your emotion, your technique, these are things most professionals spend years developing. It's rare to see such talent, especially someone so young. I would love to help you advance if you're interested. The words made her heart beat faster. She had spent years hiding her talent, fearing judgment and ridicule. And now she was being offered guidance and support from people who truly understood her craft. She felt a sense of validation she had never experienced before. As the night went on, more people approached her, each encounter reinforcing the sense that her life was shifting. Offers to perform at smaller events, invitations to music workshops, and even suggestions for formal training filled the evening. She listened carefully, absorbing each opportunity with gratitude and cautious optimism. For the first time, she began to believe that her music could be more than a private solace. It could be a path to something larger, something she had always dreamed of. Throughout the evening, she maintained her humility, never forgetting the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the countless hours spent practicing in solitude, the sacrifices she had made, and the moments of doubt that had almost silenced her music forever. Each note she had played tonight was a testament to her perseverance and dedication. The applause, the admiration, and the genuine interest of the guests were not just recognition of her skill, but acknowledgement of her resilience. The wealthy man eventually left the party quietly, his presence no longer commanding attention. He had attempted to assert control and superiority, only to be overshadowed by the very person he had intended to humiliate. She did not feel anger toward him, only a quiet sense of justice. The world had witnessed the truth. Her talent was undeniable, and no amount of arrogance could diminish it. She had remained true to herself and her art, and in doing so, she had earned a respect that could not be forced or bought. After the party, she returned to her apartment, the city lights shimmering outside her window. The quiet of her own space was comforting after the intensity of the evening. She sat at her piano, running her fingers across the keys, not to perform for anyone, but simply to reconnect with the music that had always been hers. Each note was a reminder of what she had accomplished, of the courage she had found within herself, and of the possibilities that now lay ahead. She reflected on the events of the night, realizing that her life had changed in ways she could not have imagined. The performance had been a turning point, not just because of the attention it brought, but because it had allowed her to reclaim her confidence and embrace her identity as a musician. The fear and doubt that had once seemed insurmountable were now stepping stones, guiding her toward a future she had longed for but never dared to reach. In the days that followed, the offers and invitations continued. She received messages from event planners, musicians, and teachers, each one expressing interest in her talent and offering support. She began to consider the possibilities seriously, recognizing that she could pursue music alongside her work at the restaurant, gradually building a path toward professional opportunities. The idea of performing, teaching, or even composing her own pieces became more real with each passing day. She also noticed a change in the way people at the restaurant treated her. Her coworkers looked at her with newfound respect, some expressing admiration quietly, others asking questions about her performance. The manager, who had been supportive all along, offered encouragement and advice on balancing her job with new opportunities. Even regular customers seemed to notice a difference, some commenting on her poise, others simply smiling as if sensing that something extraordinary had happened. Through it all, she remained grounded, remembering the journey that had brought her here. She knew that talent alone was not enough. It was discipline, courage, and perseverance that had allowed her to shine when it mattered most. The experience had taught her that fear could be a catalyst for growth, that challenges could reveal hidden strengths, and that true recognition came not from seeking it, but from remaining authentic and dedicated to one's craft. She began to plan carefully, considering how to embrace these opportunities without losing herself in the process. She thought about the lessons she had learned, the importance of staying humble, and the need to continue honing her skills. Music had always been her companion, her refuge, and now it was becoming a bridge to a new chapter in her life. She felt a sense of excitement, tempered by the awareness that each step forward required effort, focus, and resilience. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with possibilities and challenges alike. Yet she felt ready to face them, strengthened by the knowledge that she had already overcome one of the most difficult moments of her life. The performance had not only revealed her talent to the world, but had also revealed to herself the depth of her own courage and determination. She knew that no matter what obstacles lay ahead, she could navigate them with grace and skill, guided by the music that had always been a part of her. As she sat quietly at the piano that night, the city outside glowing softly, she allowed herself to dream again. She imagined performing in larger venues, teaching others who shared her passion, composing music that could touch hearts far beyond her own. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time they felt achievable. She realized that the night at the party had been more than a performance. It had been a turning point, a moment that transformed fear into opportunity, doubt into confidence, and hidden talent into visible brilliance. She smiled softly, letting the music fill the room, a private celebration of her journey and her triumph. The world had seen a glimpse of her talent, and now she could begin to shape her future on her own terms. Fear no longer held her back. Judgment no longer silenced her. The music was hers, the choices were hers, and the life she had always imagined was slowly unfolding before her, bright with promise and possibility.